The conference room on the 52nd floor of Harrison Tower gleamed with polished mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Portland skyline like an expensive painting. 9 board members sat in a precise U-shape around the massive table, their faces carved from stone and skepticism. Behind them, 50 shareholders filled the audience rows, their $1,000 suits rustling with anticipation of blood in the water. Victoria Harrison stood at the presentation podium, 62 years of calculated ambition, wrapped in a steel-gray designer suit. Her silver hair pulled back so tightly it could have been a weapon. The final slide of her presentation glowed behind her like an accusation. The words, "Vote of no confidence," hung in the air between them all. "William Harrison," she said, her voice carrying the weight of family disappointment and corporate necessity, "was a great CEO, past tense, but grief has compromised his judgment. This company needs leadership that prioritizes shareholders, not personal redemption projects." Her eyes swept the room, landing briefly on each board member whose vote she had already purchased with promises and threats. 5 hands when she called for the vote, 5 votes to remove her younger brother from the empire their father had left to him simply because he was born male. "I move for immediate vote of no confidence." Victoria concluded, her words final as a gavel strike. The procedural vote came swiftly. 5 hands rose like flags of surrender. Robert Chen, the swing vote, the man whose decision would seal William's fate, kept his hands folded on the table before him. His abstention was enough. The vote would proceed. Victoria allowed herself the smallest smile of victory as she returned to her seat. William Harrison sat in the front row of the audience section, not at the board table where he had presided for 15 years. His navy suit hung slightly loose on his 58-year-old frame, as if he had forgotten to eat for weeks, which perhaps he had. His silver-threaded dark hair needed cutting. His blue eyes, once sharp enough to see through any deal or deception, now held something else, something his sister called weakness, something he had learned to call clarity. Beside him sat Rachel Collins, 32 years old, and wearing the best dress she owned, which still looked modest next to the wealth surrounding them. Her nurse's hands, strong from years of lifting patients and carrying the weight of impossible shifts, gripped the armrests of her chair. She wanted to reach for her daughter to pull Maya close and run from this room full of people who saw them as pawns in a game they never asked to play. But Maya Collins, 7 years old with dark eyes that saw too much and a heart that felt everything, sat perfectly still in her chair. She wore a navy blue dress her mother had bought specially for today with white trim at the collar. Her small feet barely touched the floor. She did not understand corporate politics or stock prices or votes of no confidence. She only understood that people were trying to hurt someone she cared about. Robert Chen cleared his throat, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife through silk. "Before we proceed to the final vote," he said, his voice measured and careful, "I would like to hear from Mr. Harrison and from the child at the center of this controversy." The room erupted in murmurs. Victoria's head snapped up, her composure cracking for just a fraction of a second. That was not part of the script she had written. William started to stand, but Maya was faster. "I can talk," she said, her small voice somehow carrying to every corner of that vast room. The screen behind the podium went dark. The numbers and charts and accusations disappeared, and the room held its breath. 3 months earlier, none of them could have imagined this moment. 3 months earlier, the world was different, simpler, colder. 3 months earlier, on a Monday morning in October, when the first real cold snap hit Portland like a promise of winter, William Harrison stood in his penthouse bathroom and studied the stranger in the mirror. The homeless man staring back at him had been 21 days in the making. The designer stubble had grown into an unkempt gray beard. The carefully maintained tan had faded to the pallor of someone who slept on concrete. The $5,000 suit had been replaced by layers of Goodwill cast-offs, strategically worn and artfully stained. Only the eyes remained unchanged, blue as a clear winter sky, sharp as broken glass, holding more pain than any boardroom battle had ever caused. Thomas Bennett stood in the doorway of the bathroom, holding a tablet with the morning stock reports. He had been William's attorney for 15 years, had seen him through the heights of success and the depths of loss. But this social experiment still made him deeply uncomfortable. "Day 21, sir," Thomas said, his voice tight with concern. Any revelations yet? William adjusted the torn collar of his outermost jacket, a brown corduroy thing that smelled faintly of other people's desperation. Yes, he said quietly, that invisible people see more truth than those of us in towers. He turned away from the mirror, away from the ghost of who he used to be. On the bathroom counter sat a framed photograph, slightly faded now, protected by glass that William cleaned every single day. A little girl with his blue eyes and her mother's gentle smile looked out from a hospital bed. Emily Harrison, 6 years old, 3 weeks before the Batten disease, took her ability to smile. 4 weeks before it took her life. The memory rose unbidden, sharp as it always was. Emily's small hand in his so light it was barely there. Her voice already weak, asking the question that had haunted him for 5 years. Daddy, do people love you or your money? He had laughed then, thinking it was childish curiosity. He had not understood it was her final gift to him. The last question, the last test, the last chance to become the father she deserved instead of the CEO everyone expected. Promise me you'll remember what really matters, Emily had whispered, her breath shallow and labored. Promise, Daddy. I promise, sweetheart, he had said, not knowing he would spend the next 5 years trying to figure out what that promise meant. His wife Caroline had known, perhaps, or thought she had. 6 months after Emily's death, Caroline Harrison had written a letter in her perfect penmanship, placed it on their bed, taken every sleeping pill in the house, and made sure William would never forget his failure. The suicide note had been brief, devastating, true. You chose board meetings over our daughter's last moments. You were in Tokyo closing a deal while she asked for you. She died calling your name. I can't live with that memory. I hope you can. He could not, but he was still here, still breathing, still trying to understand what mattered. Sir, Thomas's voice pulled him back to the present. Are you certain you want to continue this? It's been 3 weeks. You've proven your point. What point is that, Thomas? William asked, moving past him into the bedroom. That people avert their eyes from poverty, that I can buy anything except genuine human connection, that my daughter's question has an answer I don't like. Thomas had no response to that. He simply followed William to the private elevator, watching as his employer descended from the penthouse to the streets below, transforming from billionaire to beggar between the 52nd floor and the ground. The October morning hit William with a shock of cold that his layers of worn clothing barely softened. Monday morning in Portland meant the city waking up to another week of routine. Coffee shop workers unlocking doors, office workers clutching travel mugs like lifelines. Everyone moving with that peculiar momentum of people going somewhere they did not particularly want to be. William made his way to his usual spot, the bus stop on Maple Street, 3 blocks from Lincoln Elementary School. He had chosen this location carefully. High-foot traffic, visible but not threatening. A bench where he could sit on the ground rather than the seat, making himself small and unthreatening. For 21 days he had sat here. For 21 days people had passed him without seeing, without stopping, without acknowledging his existence beyond the occasional change dropped into his cup, given without eye contact, accepted without gratitude, expected or offered. He had counted them. 217 people in 3 weeks. Not one had asked his name. Not one had looked him in the eye. Not one had seen him as anything more than a problem to step around or ignore. Emily's question echoed in the cold morning air. Do people love you or your money? The answer he had learned was neither. People did not love him or hate him. They simply did not see him at all. Across town in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Riverside Heights complex, where paint peeled like autumn leaves and the elevator worked only when it wanted to, Rachel Collins moved through her morning routine with the efficiency of someone who had no time to waste. She had arrived home at 6:15 that morning, her scrubs still smelling of antiseptic and exhaustion, her body heavy with the weight of another 12-hour overnight shift at Memorial Hospital. Her feet ached, her back ached. Her heart ached from the accumulated weight of seeing too much suffering and being able to do too little about it. But Maya was already awake, 7 years old and far too self-sufficient for a child who should still believe her mother could fix anything. She sat at their small kitchen table, carefully spreading peanut butter on 2 slices of bread, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration, the way it always did when she was focused. Morning, baby, Rachel said, dropping her bag by the door and moving to the sink to wash the hospital off her hands. You didn't have to make breakfast. I know, Maya said, not looking up from her careful work. But you're tired, and I'm big enough to make a sandwich. Rachel's chest tightened with love and guilt in equal measure. Maya should not have to be big enough. She should get to be small, to be taken care of, to believe her mother was a superhero instead of just a single parent barely keeping them afloat. The apartment was small but clean. Rachel made sure of that. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely large enough for 2 people to stand in. The walls were covered with Maya's drawings, bright splashes of color that hid the cracks in the plaster and the water stains from the leak upstairs that the landlord kept promising to fix. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a heart, was Maya's latest creation, a folded piece of paper covered in glitter and careful lettering. Rachel had found it this morning before leaving for her shift. Mom, you're my superhero. Love, Maya, she had cried reading it. Standing in the kitchen at 5:45 in the morning, already running late, she had let herself cry for 30 seconds before pulling herself together and heading out the door. Now she watched Maya finish making the sandwich, cutting it diagonally the way she liked, wrapping it carefully in a paper napkin because they had run out of plastic bags 3 days ago, and payday was not until Friday. Rachel opened her phone, checking her bank balance with the same sense of dread she felt every morning. $47.23 until Friday. Rent was already a month late. The credit card bill was 2 months overdue. The electricity company had sent a warning notice. But Maya had new shoes that fit. Maya had school supplies. Maya had a sandwich for lunch. That was what mattered. Maya finished packing her small backpack, the purple one with the unicorn patch she had sewn on herself. She picked up the paper heart from the table, the one she had made last night while Rachel was working her evening shift at City General before heading to Memorial for the overnight. For your locker, Maya said, presenting it to Rachel with both hands like an offering. So you remember I'm thinking about you when you're taking care of sick people. Rachel knelt down, ignoring the protest of her tired knees, and pulled her daughter close. Maya smelled like children's shampoo and crayons and pure goodness. Thank you, baby, Rachel whispered into Maya's hair. You know what? You have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. You always say that, Mom, Maya giggled, because it's true. Rachel pulled back, looking into her daughter's dark eyes. Promise me you'll never lose that kindness, no matter what life throws at you. Maya's face went serious the way it did when she made promises. I promise, she said solemnly, though she could not fully understand the weight her mother placed on those words. Rachel watched from the small balcony as Maya walked down the street towards school, her purple backpack bouncing with each step. 7 years old and walking to school alone because Rachel could not afford before-school care, and her shifts ended too late to walk her. 7 years old and already learning that sometimes you had to be braver than you wanted to be. Rachel did not know that 2 blocks away, in a corner office of Harrison Tower, Victoria Harrison was reviewing photographs taken by a private investigator she had hired to follow her brother. She did not know that William's social experiment was about to intersect with their lives in ways that would change everything. She only knew that her daughter was good and kind and brave, and that somehow, despite everything, despite the poverty and the struggle and the endless exhaustion, she had managed not to break that goodness. That would have to be enough. Maya Collins walked the familiar route to Lincoln Elementary with the confidence of a child who had made this journey many times before. The October air bit at her ears and nose, turning them pink, but she did not mind. She liked the cold. It made the world feel clean and new. In her backpack, carefully wrapped, was her sandwich. Peanut butter cut diagonally exactly how she liked it. Her stomach rumbled slightly. She had skipped breakfast, telling her mother she was not hungry because she had seen the worry in her mother's eyes when she checked her phone. She had seen the number $47.23 on the screen before her mother closed the app. Maya was 7 years old, but she understood numbers. She understood that $47 until Friday meant her mother was counting every penny, meant that breakfast for both of them was a luxury they could not afford this morning. So she had made the sandwich and saved her hunger for lunch. The bus stop on Maple Street was usually empty this time of morning, most people already on their way to work or school. But today someone sat there, not on the bench, but on the ground, his back against the bench support, as if he did not deserve the comfort of the seat itself. Maya slowed her walk, remembering her mother's warnings about strangers. But something about this man made her pause rather than cross to the other side of the street. His clothes were layered and worn the kind of threadbare appearance that spoke of many nights sleeping rough. His beard was long and unkempt, more gray than dark. His hands tucked into the pockets of his torn jacket were red from the cold. But his eyes? When he glanced up at her approach, his eyes were the most striking blue she had ever seen. Sad eyes, tired eyes, but somehow still alert, still aware, still human in a way that Maya recognized even if she could not name it. "Good morning," she said, stopping a few feet away, clutching her backpack straps. The man seemed startled that she had spoken to him. His voice, when it came, was rough from disuse, or cold, or both. "Morning, young lady." Maya shifted her weight from one foot to the other the way she did when she was making a decision. Her mother had taught her to be cautious, but her mother had also taught her to be kind. "Are you hungry, sir?" she asked. The question hung in the cold air between them. William Harrison, who had spent 21 days being invisible, being nothing, being less than the concrete beneath him, felt something crack open in his chest. This child, this small girl with dark eyes and a purple backpack, had stopped, had seen him, had asked. "I am," he admitted, his voice catching. "Yes." Maya did not hesitate. She swung her backpack around, unzipped it with cold, numbed fingers, and pulled out the carefully wrapped sandwich. "Here," she said, holding it out to him. "It's peanut butter. My mom says protein helps you stay strong in cold weather." William stared at the offered sandwich, his mind struggling to process what was happening. This child, this precious child, was offering him her lunch. Her only lunch. "That's your lunch, isn't it?" he asked, not reaching for it yet. "It's okay," Maya said, smiling in a way that made her whole face light up with pure, uncomplicated kindness. "We have spaghetti day at school today." "I'll eat then." It was a lie. William could see it in the slight way her eyes shifted, the small tell that children have before they learn to hide their truths. There was no spaghetti day. She was giving him everything she had. His hands shook as he reached out and accepted the sandwich. The paper napkin was soft in his palm, still slightly warm from being in her backpack. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking on the words. "What's your name?" "Maya Collins," she said proudly. "What's yours?" "William Harrison, CEO of $1 billion empire, owners of the tower that scraped the sky just visible above the buildings to the east, holder of more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes," looked at this child who had given him everything and found he could not speak his real name. "Just someone who needed to remember kindness exists," he said finally. Maya nodded as if this made perfect sense. "I hope you have a good day, sir," she said, adjusting her backpack. "I have to get to school now." "Wait," William called out as she started to walk away. She turned back, curious. "Your mother, she must be very proud of you." Maya's smile grew even brighter. "She works really hard. She's a nurse. She helps people too." And then she was gone, skipping down the sidewalk towards school, her purple backpack bouncing with each step, leaving William Harrison sitting on the cold ground with a peanut butter sandwich and tears streaming down his face. For 21 days, he had asked Emily's question, "Do people love you or your money?" For 21 days, he had received his answer. Neither. People did not love him. They did not even see him. But this child, this beautiful, kind, impossibly generous child, had seen him not as a billionaire or a beggar, but simply as a human being who needed help. She had given him everything she had without expecting anything in return, without knowing who he was or what he could offer, simply because he needed it and she could give it. His hands trembled as he unwrapped the sandwich. He ate it slowly, reverently, each bite tasting like redemption, like a second chance, like the answer to a question he had been asking for 5 years. This was what mattered. This was what Emily had meant. Not the deals or the money or the empire, not even the grand gestures or the charitable foundations. But this, simple human kindness, given freely in the cold morning light, by a child who had almost nothing but gave it anyway. When the sandwich was gone, William carefully folded the paper napkin and placed it in his pocket. His hands had stopped shaking. His breathing had steadied. And for the first time since Emily died, since Caroline followed her into the darkness, he felt something other than grief and guilt. He felt purpose. He pulled out the cheap prepaid phone Thomas had given him for this experiment and dialed the only number stored in it. "Thomas," he said when his attorney answered on the first ring, "I found her. I found the answer to Emily's question." "Found who, sir?" Thomas asked, confusion evident in his voice. A child who gave everything she had to a stranger. I need you to find out about her family, everything. Sir, I'm not certain this is wise. A grown man taking interest in a child could be misinterpreted. Then we do it the right way, William said firmly, transparent, respectful, through her mother first. But Thomas, I made a promise to Emily. I promised I would do something that matters. This matters. This child matters. He ended the call and sat for a long moment watching the city wake up around him. People still passed without seeing. The world still turned. But something had shifted. Some fundamental truth had been revealed. 21 days of being invisible had taught him what 5 years of grief could not. That worth was not measured in stock prices or real estate holdings. That the most valuable currency was not printed on paper, but given freely by those who had the least. That his daughter's question had a simple answer. People had not loved him or his money. But this child, this remarkable child, had loved the idea of him. The human part, the part that needed kindness. And that was enough to build on. That was enough to start keeping his promise. Thomas Bennett stood in the center of Rachel Collins's small living room 3 days later, feeling like an intruder in a sacred space. The apartment was modest to the point of austerity, but everywhere he looked he saw evidence of fierce love and determined pride. Children's drawings covered the walls in a riot of color, transforming cracked plaster into a gallery of hope. The furniture was mismatched but clean, arranged with care to maximize the limited space. Rachel Collins stood between him and her daughter, her posture protective, her nurse's hands steady despite the suspicion in her eyes. She wore scrubs from her day shift, the fabric worn soft from countless washings. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She was younger than Thomas had expected, 32, but with the kind of weariness that came from years of shouldering impossible burdens alone. Mr. Bennett, she said, her voice controlled but wary. You said this is about the sandwich Maya gave to someone. I need you to explain right now how you know about that and why you're in my home. Thomas had conducted thousands of negotiations in his 15 years as an attorney. He had faced down hostile corporate raiders and navigated Byzantine legal battles. But standing before this single mother, whose entire world fit into 2 rooms and whose love for her daughter radiated like heat from a furnace, he felt the weight of what he was about to say. Mrs. Collins, he began. Miss, she corrected sharply. There's no Mr. There never was. Miss Collins, Thomas amended. 3 days ago, your daughter gave her lunch to a man she believed was homeless. That man was my employer, William Harrison. Rachel's expression did not change, but her hands tightened slightly on Maya's shoulders. Am I supposed to know who that is? He's the CEO of Harrison Enterprises, the technology and medical conglomerate. The man who owns Harrison Tower downtown. The big building with all the glass, Maya said suddenly, her voice bright with recognition. We can see it from the park sometimes. Rachel's eyes narrowed. What was a billionaire doing dressed as a homeless man? And why are you tracking down a 7-year-old child who showed him kindness? Thomas opened his leather portfolio and withdrew a sealed envelope. Mr. Harrison has been conducting what he calls a social experiment for the past 3 weeks, observing how people interact with those they perceive as having nothing. Your daughter was the only person in 21 days who stopped, who saw him as a human being, who gave without expectation of return. So this is what, Rachel's voice had gone cold, some kind of reward for passing his test. We don't need charity, Mr. Bennett. It's not charity, Miss Collins. It's an opportunity. Thomas held out the envelope. Rachel did not take it. After a moment, he opened it himself and read the contents aloud. Mr. Harrison would like to establish an educational trust for Maya covering all expenses from private school through university. He would also like to offer you a position as nursing coordinator at the Reynolds Medical Foundation with a starting salary of $175,000 annually, full benefits, and reasonable hours. The silence that followed was profound. Maya looked up at her mother, not understanding the numbers, but recognizing the tension in the air. Rachel's face had gone pale, then flushed. That's not possible, she whispered. People don't just give away that kind of money. Mr. Harrison lost his daughter 5 years ago, Thomas said quietly. Emily Harrison. She was 6 years old when she died from Batten disease. His wife took her own life 6 months later. Maya's kindness reminded him of something he thought he had lost forever. Rachel's hand went to her mouth. Maya, sensing something important happening, spoke up with the directness of childhood. "Is he okay, the blue-eyed man? I was worried about him." Thomas looked down at the small girl whose simple act had moved a broken man to tears. "He's much better now, Maya, because of you." "I want to meet him," Maya announced. "Can we, Mom?" "Please." Rachel shook her head slowly, still processing. "Maya, go to your room for a minute, baby. I need to talk to Mr. Bennett alone." "But Mom, now please." Maya's face fell, but she obeyed, dragging her feet toward the small bedroom she called her own. When the door closed, Rachel turned back to Thomas with an intensity that made him take an involuntary step backward. "My daughter gave a sandwich to someone she thought needed it. That's what I taught her to do. That's who she is. And now you're telling me a billionaire wants to change our entire lives because of it." She crossed her arms. "What does he really want, Mr. Bennett? Nobody gives away that kind of money for nothing, especially not to strangers." "He wants to honor his daughter's memory," Thomas said. "Emily asked him before she died if people loved him or his money. Your daughter answered that question in a way that gave him hope for the first time in 5 years. And what happens when he decides we're not what he thought? When the novelty wears off, my daughter gets attached to this new life, this new school, this security, and then what he realizes we're not his dead daughter and walks away." The question hung between them, sharp and legitimate. Thomas had asked William the same thing. He had warned about the optics, the complications, the potential for disaster. But William had been adamant. "Miss Collins," Thomas said carefully, "I've worked for William Harrison for 15 years. I've seen him build an empire and lose everything that mattered. I've never seen him cry. Not at his daughter's funeral, not at his wife's. Not once in all those years," he paused, "until your daughter gave him that sandwich. He sat on that bench and wept like a man who had just remembered how to feel." Rachel's eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. "That doesn't make this safe. That doesn't make this right. My daughter is not responsible for healing a billionaire's trauma." "No," Thomas agreed. "She's not, which is why Mr. Harrison wants to meet with you first, to explain his intentions, to let you set the boundaries, to do this properly, transparently, in whatever way makes you comfortable." He set the envelope on their small kitchen table. "He would like to invite you both to dinner, tomorrow evening if possible. No pressure, no obligations, just a chance to talk." Rachel stared at the envelope like it might bite. "And if I say no, then I leave and you never hear from us again. Mr. Harrison was very clear about that. This is your choice, Miss Collins, yours and Maya's." After Thomas left, Rachel sat at the kitchen table for a long time, the unopened envelope between her hands. Maya emerged from her room, cautiously reading her mother's mood with the precision of a child who had learned to navigate adult emotions too early. "Are we in trouble?" Maya asked softly. "No, baby. Come here." Rachel pulled Maya onto her lap, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and innocence. "Mr. Harrison, the man you gave your sandwich to, he wants to help us. He wants to give you a better school and give Mommy a better job. Because I was nice to him? Yes." Maya thought about this for a moment. "Is it okay to accept help from people?" Rachel felt her throat tighten. "I don't know, baby. I really don't know." That night, after Maya was asleep, Rachel sat in the glow of her laptop and searched for William Harrison. The articles came up quickly. The business successes, the charitable foundations, the tragedy. Harrison family tragedy: billionaire's daughter Emily dies at 6. The photograph showed a little girl with striking blue eyes and a smile that lit up the whole image. Rachel's breath caught, not because Emily looked like Maya. They did not share features or coloring, but the expression, the openness, the quality of kindness that shone through even in a photograph that was pure Maya. She clicked another link. Caroline Harrison's suicide devastates family. The suicide note had been leaked to the press, causing a scandal that had made national news. Rachel read the words and felt sick. "You chose board meetings over our daughter's last moments. You were in Tokyo closing a deal while she called for you. She died saying your name. I can't live with that memory. I hope you can." Rachel closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of her small living room. This man, this William Harrison, was not offering them a fairy tale. He was offering them his guilt, his grief, his desperate attempt to find meaning in a loss that had destroyed him. And her daughter, her kind, beautiful daughter, had become tangled in that grief without understanding what it meant. The question was whether Rachel could risk it, whether the promise of security was worth the danger of becoming someone's redemption project. She thought of the bank balance, $47.23. She thought of the rent notices and the disconnection warnings, and the nights she worked herself to exhaustion just to keep them afloat. She thought of Maya growing up in this apartment, going to underfunded schools, having to be brave and self-sufficient because her mother could not afford for her to be a child. And she thought of the alternative. Private school, college paid for, a job with reasonable hours that would let her actually be present for her daughter's childhood. The cost was unknown. The benefit was everything. Rachel picked up her phone and typed a careful message to the number Thomas Bennett had left. "We'll come to dinner. Tomorrow at 7. But Mr. Harrison needs to understand that Maya is my daughter, not a replacement for anyone." The response came within minutes. "Understood. A car will pick you up at 6:30. Thank you for giving him this chance." The Harrison estate sat on 5 acres in the wealthy West Hills neighborhood, a modern masterpiece of glass and stone that managed to be impressive without being ostentatious. Rachel and Maya arrived in a black car that was more comfortable than any vehicle Rachel had ever been in, driven by a professionally courteous driver who answered Maya's endless questions about the car's features with patient good humor. "It's like a castle," Maya breathed as they pulled up the long driveway, her face pressed against the window. "It's a house," Rachel corrected, her own nerves making her voice sharper than she intended. "Just a very big one." And the front door opened before they reached it. William Harrison stood in the doorway, and Rachel's breath caught, despite her determination to remain unmoved. He was tall silver, threading through dark hair, wearing casual slacks and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. But it was his eyes that stopped her. The same piercing blue Maya had described, but filled with such vulnerability and hope that Rachel felt her carefully constructed defenses waver. Before Rachel could say anything, William knelt down to Maya's eye level, a gesture so natural and respectful that it made Rachel's chest tighten. "Hello, Maya," he said, his voice gentle. "Thank you for the sandwich. It meant more than you know." Maya's face lit up with recognition and delight. "You look so different and clean." She clapped a hand over her mouth, realizing what she had said, but William laughed. It was a real laugh, surprise out of him, the kind that made his whole face change. "You're absolutely right," he agreed. "I look much better when I shower regularly." He stood and extended his hand to Rachel. "Miss Collins, thank you for coming. I know this situation is unusual." Rachel shook his hand, noting the firm grip, the calluses that suggested he did more than sit behind a desk. "Mr. Harrison, I appreciate your offer to help us, but I need you to understand something from the start. I'm only here because Maya wanted to meet you. If this goes forward, there have to be boundaries. Clear ones." "I wouldn't expect anything less," William said. "Please come in. I thought we could have dinner in the small dining room." Less formal. The small dining room was still larger than Rachel's entire apartment, but William had clearly made an effort to make it feel intimate. The table was set for 3 with fresh flowers in the center and warm lighting that created pools of golden comfort. Through the windows, the city spread out below like a carpet of lights. Maya was fascinated by everything touching the soft fabric of her chair, examining the silverware, exclaiming over the view. William watched her with an expression Rachel could not quite read. Not longing exactly, not replacement, something gentler, something like recognition. "I had the chef make mac and cheese," William said to Maya as they sat down. "Whereas Bennett mentioned it's your favorite." "It is." Maya bounced slightly in her seat. "Mom makes it with extra cheese." "Then I asked for extra cheese, too." The meal began with careful politeness, William asking Maya about school, Rachel watching every interaction with the wariness of a mother wolf protecting her cub. But gradually, as the conversation flowed and William shared stories of his own childhood, Rachel felt herself beginning to relax. "I grew up in a neighborhood not unlike yours," William said, cutting his food into neat portions. "My mother worked 3 jobs after my father left. I remember eating cereal for dinner more nights than I can count." We have cereal sometimes too, Maya offered, but Mom always makes sure I have breakfast. Rachel felt heat rise in her cheeks, embarrassed by the reminder of their poverty in this place of plenty. But William's expression held no judgment. Your mother is doing an extraordinary job, he said, looking directly at Rachel. Raising a child who thinks of others before herself, who sees people in need, and acts without hesitation that doesn't happen by accident. That's the result of exceptional parenting. Rachel found she could not hold his gaze. I just teach her to be kind. That's not a small thing, Miss Collins. It's perhaps the most important thing. After dinner, while Maya explored the small library William had opened for her, he and Rachel sat in the adjoining sitting room with coffee. The moment of real conversation had arrived, and Rachel steeled herself for it. Mr. Harrison, she began. William, please. William, I need to ask you directly. Is Maya a replacement for Emily in your mind? He did not flinch from the question. Instead, he pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. Emily Harrison, bright blue eyes, shining smile lighting up her whole face, sitting in a hospital bed, surrounded by stuffed animals. Emily was fearless, William said quietly. Even when she got sick, even when the treatments made her weak, she never complained. She worried about everyone else, the nurses, the other kids in the ward, me. His voice cracked slightly. 3 days before she died, she asked me if people loved me or my money. I thought it was a strange question for a 6-year-old. I didn't understand she was trying to teach me something. He put the phone away and met Rachel's eyes. Maya is not Emily. They're different children with different personalities, different lives. But when Maya gave me that sandwich, she reminded me of the lesson Emily was trying to teach. That worth isn't measured in bank accounts or business deals. It's measured in moments of genuine connection. And when you've learned that lesson, Rachel pressed, when you feel like you've honored Emily's memory, what happens to us then? That's a fair question, William acknowledged, and I can't give you guarantees about the future. I can only tell you what I intend. I intend to help Maya reach her full potential, whatever that looks like. I intend to support your family in ways that respect your independence and your relationship with your daughter. And I intend to be honest with you about my motivations and my limitations. He leaned forward slightly. Miss Collins, I'm not looking for a daughter to replace Emily. I'm looking to honor her memory by helping a child who embodies the values she represented. If you'll let me. Rachel wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed at her to protect Maya from this complicated grief, this potentially dangerous entanglement. But she thought of the $47 in her account, the double shifts, the exhaustion, the future stretching ahead with no relief in sight. I have conditions, she heard herself say. William nodded. I'm listening. First, Maya goes to Westbrook Academy. I've researched it. They focus on character development, not just academics. If we're doing this, I want her in a school that will nurture who she is, not just what she can achieve. Agreed. Second, I don't want your highest paid position. I want to start as a regular staff coordinator at a salary appropriate for my experience. If I'm good at my wow, I'll earn promotions. I want Maya to see that positions are earned, not given. William smiled slightly. That would put you at around $68,000 annually, considerably less than I offered. But honest, Rachel said firmly, and sustainable. I won't accept anything I don't feel I've worked for. Understood. What else? We stay in our apartment for at least a year. Maya's whole world is about to change. I don't want to uproot her completely all at once. That's very wise. Rachel took a deep breath. And William, this is the most important one. If I ever feel like you're seeing Emily instead of Maya, if I sense that you've called her by the wrong name or confused them in your mind, this arrangement ends immediately. I won't let my daughter be a ghost stand-in. The words were harsh, but William did not flinch. You have my word, and thank you for being direct. Maya deserves a mother who protects her even from well-meaning mistakes. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the agreement settling between them. From the library, they could hear Maya reading aloud to herself, her young voice stumbling over difficult words, but pressing forward with determination. She taught herself to read, Rachel said softly. The schools didn't have resources for advanced students, so she just figured it out on her own. Remarkable, William murmured. She is, Rachel agreed, which is why I'm taking this risk, not for me, for her, because she deserves every opportunity. But if you hurt her, Mr. Harrison, if you break her heart or make her feel less than she is, I will make you regret it. Billionaire or not. William met her fierce gaze and nodded. I would expect nothing less. And for what it's worth, Miss Collins, I respect you tremendously. This conversation could have been about what you could get from me. Instead, it's been about protecting your daughter. That's exactly the kind of parent Maya needs. The contract was signed 2 days later. Maya would start at Westbrook Academy the following Monday, midway through the fall semester. Rachel would begin at Reynolds Medical Foundation the same week. The educational trust was established in Maya's name, accessible for school expenses and eventually college. Life changed overnight and gradually all at once. Maya's first day at Westbrook was both exciting and terrifying. The school was beautiful, all brick and ivy and manicured lawns, the kind of place Rachel had never imagined her daughter attending. The uniform had cost more than Rachel usually spent on clothes in 6 months, but it was included in the scholarship, along with books and supplies and everything else Maya might need. Rachel walked her to the classroom, her hand tight on Maya's shoulder. Mrs. Blackwell, the second-grade teacher, was a warm woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a gentle manner. Maya, welcome, she said. We're so glad to have you. I've saved you a seat next to Carlos. He started here on scholarship last month, too, so he knows what it's like to be new. Carlos Ramirez was a slight boy with serious dark eyes and a careful smile. He looked up when Maya sat down and whispered, Hi, don't worry about Brandon. He's mean to everyone. Who's Brandon? Maya whispered back, as if summoned a larger boy with expensive sneakers and an entitled sneer turned around from the seat in front of them. You must be the charity case my dad was talking about. Brandon, Mrs. Blackwell said sharply. Face forward, please. But the damage was done. Maya felt her face flush, recognizing the tone, if not fully understanding the words. Rachel, watching from the doorway, felt rage and protectiveness war in her chest. After school, Maya was quiet on the walk home. Rachel waited, knowing her daughter would talk when she was ready. Mom, Maya said finally, what's a charity case? Rachel's hands tightened on the steering wheel of their old car. It's what people say when they don't understand kindness, when they think help is something to be ashamed of instead of something to be grateful for. Am I a charity case? No, baby. You're a little girl who showed kindness to someone who needed it, and he wanted to say thank you. There's no shame in that. But Rachel could see the seed of doubt planted in her daughter's eyes, and she hated it. Rachel's first day at Reynolds Medical Foundation was equally challenging. The office was sleek and modern, filled with people who had graduate degrees and came from families with money. Rachel, with her associate degree earned at night school while working full-time, felt like an imposter. Her supervisor, Linda Park, was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who looked Rachel up and down with frank assessment. I don't care who recommended you or how you got this job, she said bluntly. I care about whether you can do the work. Show me you can and we'll be fine. Coast on connections and you won't last a week. Rachel lifted her chin. I've worked double shifts for 7 years, keeping patients alive with inadequate resources. I think I can handle coordinator duties. Linda's expression softened slightly. Good, then let's see what you can do. The whispers started on day 3. Rachel heard them in the break room, saw them in the pointed glances. Sleeping her way to the top. Must be nice to have the CEO as your sugar daddy. I heard she's using her kid to manipulate him. Rachel said nothing, just worked harder. She reviewed protocols, identified inefficiencies, and within 2 weeks presented Linda with a proposal for mobile health clinics to serve underserved communities. Linda read it carefully, then looked up with respect in her eyes. This is excellent work, Collins, really excellent. I'm forwarding this to the director. Small victories, Rachel told herself. Build credibility piece by piece. William kept his promise about boundaries. He did not drop by unannounced or insert himself into their daily lives. Instead, he proposed dinner every 2 weeks, always asking Rachel's permission, always including them both. The first dinner was at a family restaurant, not the mansion. William ordered a burger and let Maya choose whatever she wanted from the menu. They talked about school, about Maya's love of science, about small, easy things. The second dinner was at the Science Museum, where William patiently explained planetary motion while Maya stared in wonder at the orrery. Rachel watched them together and felt her guard dropping incrementally. The third dinner was when everything shifted. They were back at the mansion, Maya having grown comfortable enough to chatter freely about her day. She told a joke she had learned from Carlos, something silly about a chicken and a road, and she laughed at her own punchline with pure childish joy. William laughed too, his face relaxing into genuine amusement. Emily, that's so... He stopped. The word hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Maya's laughter died. She looked at William with confusion. My name is Maya, Mr. Harrison. Rachel felt ice flood her veins. This was the moment she had feared. The proof that Maya was just a placeholder for a dead girl. William's face had gone pale. He set down his fork carefully and then did something Rachel did not expect. He stood up from his seat, walked around the table and knelt beside Maya's chair. Maya, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I am so sorry. That was unfair to you. You are not Emily. You're yourself. You're Maya Collins, and you're remarkable for who you are, not because you remind me of anyone else. Maya's lower lip trembled. Do you wish I was her? No, sweetheart. William's eyes were bright with tears. I wish you could have known her. I wish she was still here. But I'm honored to know you. As yourself, I'm sorry I forgot that, even for a second. Rachel watched this moment, her heart in her throat. This was the test. This was where William proved whether he understood the difference between honoring memory and living in the past. Maya, with the resilience of childhood, seemed to accept this. It's okay, she said softly. Sometimes my mom calls me by her sister's name when she's tired. People make mistakes. But Rachel caught William's eye across the table, and her expression said clearly what her daughter's forgiveness had granted him. One mistake, one pass, not two. William nodded almost imperceptibly. Message received. That night after Maya was asleep, Rachel's phone buzzed with a text from William. I owe you an apology as well. I promised to see Maya as herself. I failed tonight. It won't happen again. Rachel stared at the message for a long time before responding. See that it doesn't. She's not a ghost. She's a living child who deserves to be seen. I know, and I'm grateful you called me on it. Meanwhile, in a corner office of Harrison Tower, Victoria, Harrison reviewed the latest photographs from her private investigator with cold satisfaction. William having dinner with the Collins woman and her daughter. William picking Maya up from school. William clearly becoming attached to this family in ways that made him vulnerable. Perfect. She had 4 board votes secured through a combination of promised favors and unveiled threats. She needed one more. Robert Chen was the target, the swing vote, the man whose decision would determine whether she finally took control of the company that should have been hers from the beginning. Victoria placed a call to one of Portland's most aggressive tabloid reporters. I have a story for you, she said, about William Harrison's unusual relationship with a 7-year-old girl. The pieces were falling into place. In 90 days at the annual board meeting, she would finally claim what was rightfully hers. And if her sentimental fool of a brother got destroyed in the process, well, he had brought it on himself. William Harrison stood at the window of his penthouse that night, looking out over the city, where somewhere Rachel and Maya slept in their small apartment. He had made a mistake tonight, called Maya by his daughter's name, crossed a line he had promised not to cross. But Maya had forgiven him. And more importantly, he had caught himself, had recognized the error, had apologized not just to the child, but to himself, to Emily's memory, to the promise he was trying to keep. Do something that matters. Emily had asked. He was trying. God, he was trying. His phone buzzed with a message from Thomas. Sir, we have a problem. Victoria has hired a PR firm, the same one she used after Emily died. I think she's planning something. William read the message and felt the old familiar weight settle on his shoulders. His sister had always resented him, their father's old-fashioned preference for a male heir, the company going to William despite Victoria's equal qualifications, the years of building resentment into something harder and colder. He had hoped his grief would soften her, that losing Emily and Caroline would make Victoria see that family mattered more than corporate control. He had been wrong. Monitor the situation, he texted back, but don't engage yet. I won't let her turn my attempt to help this family into ammunition against them. He looked at the framed photo of Emily on his desk. 6 years old, smiling despite the tubes and machines, brave until the very end. I'm trying to keep my promise, sweetheart, he whispered. I'm trying to do something that matters. Please let me get this right. The city below offered no answers. But somewhere in that vast sprawl of light and life, a 7-year-old girl slept peacefully dreaming, whatever children dream unaware that her simple act of kindness had set events in motion that would test everyone involved. The sandwich had changed everything. Now they would all discover whether that change would save them or destroy them. The scandal broke on a Tuesday morning in late January, 45 days before the annual board meeting that would determine William Harrison's fate. Rachel was reviewing patient files in her small office at Reynolds Medical Foundation when her phone exploded with notifications. Text messages from numbers she did not recognize, emails flooding her inbox, missed calls from reporters whose names she had only seen in bylines. She opened the first link with trembling hands and felt the world tilt sideways. Billionaire's questionable obsession. William Harrison's unusual relationship with 7-year-old girl raises concerns. The article was accompanied by photographs. William and Maya at the Science Museum, his hand on her shoulder as he pointed to an exhibit. William picking Maya up from Westbrook Academy, both of them laughing at some shared joke. William and Rachel and Maya at a restaurant looking for all the world like a family. The text was worse than the images. Innuendo wrapped in journalistic objectivity. Questions about appropriate boundaries. Speculation about a wealthy man seeking to replace his dead daughter with a living child. Anonymous quotes from concerned parents at Westbrook Academy wondering if Maya Collins was safe. Rachel's vision blurred. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. This was her nightmare made real. Not poverty, not struggle, but this. Her daughter's name and face splashed across the internet associated with words like inappropriate and concerning and questionable. Her office door opened. Linda Park stood there, her expression grim. Collins, we need to talk. The meeting with Human Resources was brief and devastating. Pending investigation into the nature of her relationship with William Harrison and the appropriateness of her hiring Rachel Collins was suspended with pay effective immediately. She was to have no contact with anyone from the foundation until the matter was resolved. I didn't do anything wrong, Rachel said, her voice steady despite the panic screaming through her veins. Mr. Harrison offered me a job based on my qualifications. That may be true, the HR director said, not unkindly, but the optics are problematic. We need to investigate. I'm sure you understand. Rachel did understand. She understood that poor people did not get the benefit of the doubt, that single mothers who accepted help from wealthy men were automatically suspect, that her daughter's act of kindness had been twisted into something ugly and dangerous. She drove to Westbrook Academy in a daze, arriving just as the school day ended. The headmaster's secretary was waiting for her at the entrance, her expression professionally sympathetic and personally cold. Miss Collins, Headmaster Robertson would like to see you. Maya was in the office, sitting very small in a large chair, her backpack clutched on her lap. Her eyes were red from crying. When she saw Rachel, she flew across the room and buried her face in her mother's stomach. Mom, everyone's saying weird things about Mr. Harrison. Brandon said his dad says Mr. Harrison is a bad man and I'm in danger. Am I in danger, Mom? Rachel held her daughter and met the headmaster's eyes over Maya's head. Robertson was a distinguished man in his 60s who had built Westbrook's reputation on academic excellence and unimpeachable character. He looked deeply uncomfortable. Miss Collins, I'm sure you've seen the news. We've had several parents express concern about Maya's continued enrollment. Not about Maya herself, he added quickly. She's a delightful child and an excellent student. But the association with Mr. Harrison, given the current scrutiny, is creating a distraction. Are you expelling her? Rachel asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Not expelling. We're suggesting a leave of absence until this matter is resolved, for Maya's own well-being and safety. Rachel wanted to scream, to rage against the unfairness, to demand they defend her daughter instead of caving to the pressure of wealthy parents who saw scandal where there should only be kindness. But Maya was shaking in her arms, and making a scene would only make things worse. Fine, she said. We'll go. In the car, Maya was silent for 5 blocks before the question came. Mom, did I do something bad by giving Mr. Harrison my sandwich? Did I make all this happen? Rachel pulled over, unable to see the road through her tears. She unbuckled and pulled Maya into the front seat, holding her tight. No, baby. You did something beautiful. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped them. That's never wrong, never. Some people don't understand that. Some people see kindness and they get suspicious because they can't imagine doing something good without wanting something back. But everyone thinks Mr. Harrison is bad now because of me. This isn't because of you, Maya. This is because of adults who are playing games you don't understand. But I promise you we're going to be okay. It was a lie. Rachel had no idea if they would be okay. But children needed their mothers to be certain even when the world was falling apart. At home, Rachel's phone would not stop ringing. She finally answered when she saw Thomas Bennett's name. Miss Collins, I'm so sorry. We had no indication this was coming. Who did this? Rachel demanded. Who gave them those photographs? We're investigating. But Miss Collins, there's something else. Child Protective Services received an anonymous complaint this morning. They're opening an investigation into Maya's welfare. Someone will be coming to interview you both. Rachel felt the floor drop out from under her. CPS, the nuclear option. The thing every poor parent feared because once they were involved, once they started questioning your fitness, you could lose everything. When, she whispered, tomorrow. I'll be there with you, and Miss Collins William wants you to know that he takes full responsibility for this. He never intended for Maya to be hurt by his attempt to help. Tell Mr. Harrison, Rachel said, her voice shaking with fury and fear and exhaustion, that his intentions don't matter. Tell him my daughter came home crying today because children called her a victim. Tell him I lost my job. Tell him we're being investigated by CPS. And then tell him to stay away from us. She ended the call before Thomas could respond. That night, Rachel and Maya ate cereal for dinner in silence. The apartment that had felt small but safe now felt like a trap. Rachel had $47 in her bank account again. No baha, no prospects, and a daughter whose innocence had been stolen by adults playing power games. Maya pushed her cereal around the bowl without eating. Mom, can I ask you something? Anything, baby. If I could take back giving the sandwich, would you want me to? If it meant none of this happened? Rachel set down her own spoon and took Maya's hands in hers. Maya Collins, you listen to me. The world needs more kindness, not less. What you did was right and good and true. The fact that other people are trying to make it ugly doesn't change that. Do you understand me? Maya nodded, but her eyes were still full of doubt. That night, after Maya finally cried herself to sleep, Rachel sat in the darkness and let herself break. She had tried so hard, worked so many hours, sacrificed so much to keep them afloat. And for a brief shining moment, she had believed the fairy tale, believed that kindness could be rewarded, that help could come without strings attached. She had been a fool. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she opened it. Miss Collins, this is Victoria Harrison Williams' sister. I think it's time you and I had a conversation about my brother's true motivations. Coffee tomorrow, I can explain what he's really after. Rachel stared at the message for a long moment. Every instinct screamed trap, but she was drowning and Victoria Harrison was offering what looked like a lifeline. She typed a single word. When? The response came immediately. 10 a.m., Stumptown Coffee on Division. Come alone. While Rachel wrestled with impossible choices in her darkened apartment, Thomas Bennett sat in William Harrison's penthouse office, surrounded by evidence that painted a damning picture. The photographs had come from a professional, high quality, strategic angles, taken over the course of 6 weeks tracking every interaction between William and the Collins family. The metadata showed they had been uploaded to the tabloid server from an IP address that Thomas had traced to a public relations firm called Strategic Communications LLC. The same firm Victoria Harrison had hired 3 years ago to manage media coverage of Emily's death. It's her, Thomas said flatly. Your sister orchestrated this entire thing. William stood at the window, his back to the room, his shoulders rigid with barely controlled rage. Why, what does destroying an innocent child accomplish? It doesn't have to accomplish anything except making you look unstable, emotional, unfit to lead the company. Thomas pulled up another document on his tablet. I also found this. Victoria Short sold 50,000 shares of Harrison Enterprises stock 3 days before the scandal broke. The stock dropped 18% when the news hit. She made $14 million. William turned his face carved from ice. She profited from this, from traumatizing a 7-year-old girl. It gets worse. Thomas pulled up another file, his expression grim. I went back through her trading history. 5 years ago, right before Emily's death was announced to the public, Victoria short sold 70,000 shares. The stock dropped 22% on the news. She made $8 million from your daughter's death. The silence that followed was absolute. William's face had gone white, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. My sister, he said slowly, each word deliberate and controlled, has been profiting from family tragedy, from grief, from the deaths of children. It's securities fraud, Thomas confirmed. I've already contacted the SEC. They're opening an investigation. But William, it's going to take time. The board meeting is in 45 days. Victoria has the votes. If we don't act now, I know. William's voice was hollow. She wins. She gets the company. And Rachel and Maya are left dealing with the wreckage of my attempt to help them. He walked to his desk and picked up the framed photo of Emily. His daughter smiled out at him, frozen forever at 6 years old, brave and kind and gone. What would you do, sweetheart? He whispered. How do I fix this? The photo, of course, offered no answers. But somewhere in William's grief-sharpened mind, a plan began to form. Thomas, I need you to do 3 things. First, prepare a complete dossier on Victoria's trading patterns, every suspicious transaction, every convenient profit. I want it airtight. Done. Second, contact the CPS investigator assigned to Maya's case. Provide them with the forensic analysis showing those photos were taken by a PI hired specifically to create a scandal. Prove the complaint was made in bad faith. I'll handle it. Third, William paused, his jaw tight. Contact Robert Chen. Tell him I'm requesting an emergency meeting with the full board before the annual meeting. I'm going to put everything on the table. Victoria's fraud. My intentions with the Collins family, all of it. Let the board decide with complete information. Thomas nodded slowly. That's a risk. If you miscalculate if the board sides with Victoria anyway, then I lose. But Rachel and Maya deserve better than being collateral damage in a corporate war. I won't let my sister destroy them to get to me. The CPS investigator arrived at Rachel's apartment at 9 a.m. the next morning, exactly 1 hour before Rachel was supposed to meet Victoria Harrison. The investigator was a tired-looking woman in her 40s named Janet Morrison, who had clearly seen too much human misery to be shocked by anything. Thomas Bennett arrived with her as promised, carrying a leather portfolio that looked expensive and official. Miss Collins, Janet said, settling into the worn armchair Rachel offered. I'm here to investigate a complaint that your daughter Maya may be in an unsafe situation involving William Harrison. I need to ask you some questions, and I'll need to speak with Maya privately as well. Rachel's hands trembled as she nodded. Maya sat on the couch, her small face serious and scared. Janet's questions were direct but not unkind. How did you meet William Harrison? What is the nature of your relationship? Has he ever made you or Maya uncomfortable? Has he ever touched Maya inappropriately? Has he given you money beyond the employment contract? Rachel answered each question honestly, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Thomas sat silently taking notes. When Rachel's voice broke, answering a particularly painful question about whether she had ever felt pressured to maintain the relationship with William, he reached across and placed a hand briefly on her shoulder. The gesture was professional, steadying, nothing more. But Rachel felt the warmth of it long after he withdrew his hand. When it was Maya's turn, Rachel started to follow her daughter into the bedroom, but Janet stopped her gently. I need to speak with her alone, Miss Collins. It's protocol. 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. Rachel paced the small living room while Thomas made quiet phone calls in the corner. When the bedroom door finally opened, Maya emerged looking confused but not distressed. Janet's expression had softened considerably. Miss Collins, I've seen a lot of concerning situations in my career. This is not one of them. Your daughter is bright, well-adjusted, and clearly adores you. She described Mr. Harrison as a friend who listens to her and makes her mother smile. When I asked if he had ever scared her or made her uncomfortable, she looked at me like I was crazy. Rachel felt her knees go weak with relief. However, Janet continued, I still need to complete my investigation. I'll be reviewing the employment records, speaking with Maya's school, and following up in 2 weeks. But I want you to know that my preliminary assessment is that Maya is safe, loved, and thriving. After Janet left, Thomas opened his portfolio. Miss Collins, I have something to show you. The forensic analysis proved that every photograph used in the tabloid article had been taken by a private investigator hired by Strategic Communications LLC. The same firm had been paid $200,000 by Victoria Harrison 3 days before the scandal broke. The complaint to CPS had been made from a burner phone, but Thomas's investigators had traced it to a number that had previously called Victoria's office 17 times. Rachel stared at the evidence, feeling rage build in her chest like a wave. She did this. William's sister did this to my daughter. Why, to hurt William, to make him look unstable so she can take control of Harrison Enterprises. You and Maya are collateral damage in a corporate power play. Rachel thought of the message from Victoria, the offer to explain William's true motivations. It had been a setup, another manipulation, another attempt to isolate William from anyone who might support him. I need to warn him, Rachel said. He knows. And Miss Collins, he wants you to know that he's going to fix this. The board meeting is in 45 days. He's going to present everything. Victoria's fraud, the manufactured scandal, all of it. But he wanted me to tell you that you don't have to be involved. If you want to walk away, take Maya and disappear from this mess, he'll understand. The trust fund is irrevocable. You'll have the money for her education regardless. Rachel looked at her daughter, who was coloring quietly at the kitchen table, trying to pretend she was not listening to every word. Maya, who had given everything she had to a stranger because she thought he needed it. Maya, who was being punished for being kind. No, Rachel said. We don't run, we fight. The emergency board meeting was called for 2 weeks before the scheduled annual meeting. William had requested it under a rarely used provision in the corporate bylaws that allowed the CEO to convene the board for matters of urgent corporate concern. Victoria had been furious when she received the notice, but she could not legally refuse. She arrived at Harrison Tower on the designated morning with her 4 allied board members in tow, confident that whatever William planned, she had the votes to override him. What she did not expect was to find Rachel Collins and Maya sitting in the front row of the audience section. What is this? Victoria demanded, her composure cracking. That child shouldn't be here. This is a private board meeting. It's a meeting about that child, William said calmly from his position at the head of the table. I thought she should hear the truth about what's been done to her. Robert Chen, the swing vote, looked uncomfortable. The other board members shifted in their seats, uncertain about what was coming. William stood and activated the presentation screen behind him. The first slide was simple, a photograph of Maya at the bus stop holding out a sandwich to a man dressed in ragged clothes. 3 months ago, William began, his voice steady and clear. I was conducting a social experiment. I wanted to understand how people treated those they perceived as having nothing. For 21 days, I sat on city streets dressed as a homeless man. 217 people passed me. Not one stopped. Not one asked my name. Not one saw me as fully human. The next slide showed Maya's smiling face. Except this child. Maya Collins, 7 years old, gave me her only lunch because I looked hungry. She did not know who I was. She did not expect anything in return. She simply saw someone in need and she helped. Victoria's expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes betrayed her nervousness. William continued his presentation, methodical and devastating. He showed the evidence of Victoria's short selling, the pattern of profits from family tragedies, the payments to the PR firm, the private investigators' photos, the connection to the anonymous CPS complaint. My sister, William said, his voice thick with controlled emotion, has been systematically profiting from grief. She made $8 million when my daughter died. She made $14 million by manufacturing a scandal around Maya Collins. She did this not because she believed there was any real danger, but because she wanted to make me look unfit to lead this company. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Victoria stood, her face flushed with anger. This is slander. I have every right to manage my investments as I see fit. You have no right, William said quietly, to destroy a child to increase your portfolio. Robert Chen cleared his throat. Mr. Harrison, these are serious allegations. But I have to ask, what were your true intentions with the Collins family? The optics, regardless of Victoria's actions, are concerning. William looked directly at Rachel, then at Maya. My intentions were to honor my daughter's memory by helping a child who reminded me what matters. Emily asked me before she died if people loved me or my money. Maya answered that question. She saw me as human when I had nothing to offer her. That kind of character is rare and precious. I wanted to nurture it. He pulled up a new slide. The plans for the Emily and Maya Center for Pediatric Diagnosis. $500 million in funding. State-of-the-art facilities for early detection of rare diseases. Rachel's name listed as Director of Nursing Protocols. This is what I intended to build, William said. A legacy that honors both Emily's memory and Maya's compassion. A place that saves children the way my daughter could not be saved. I asked Rachel Collins to help because she's a brilliant nurse with firsthand understanding of how the medical system fails struggling families. Another slide. Letters from Rachel's supervisors at both hospitals where she had worked praising her competence and dedication. Performance reviews from her brief time at Reynolds Medical Foundation showing she had earned her position through merit. Ms. Collins was hired because she's exceptional at her job. The timing may have been connected to Maya's kindness, but her qualifications are unquestionable. William took a breath and looked at each board member in turn. I made a mistake by calling Maya by my daughter's name once. I apologized immediately. I have been careful to see Maya as herself, not as a replacement for Emily. But I have also been honest with myself and with Rachel about my motivations. I am trying to do something good with the resources I have. If that makes me unfit to lead this company, then I accept your judgment. Victoria stood preparing to present her counter-argument when Maya's small voice cut through the tension. Can I say something? Every head turned. The 7-year-old child stood up from her seat, her hands clasped in front of her, her voice trembling but determined. You don't have to, sweetheart, Rachel said softly. I want to. Maya walked to the front of the room. Thomas quickly adjusted a microphone on the podium, lowering it to her height. The room held its breath. Maya looked at the board members, at Victoria's cold expression, at William's barely controlled emotion. And then she began to speak. My name is Maya Collins. I'm 7.5 years old. 3 months ago, I gave Mr. Harrison a sandwich because he looked hungry and sad. I didn't know he was rich. I didn't know he had lost a daughter named Emily. I just knew someone needed help and I could help them. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. After that, Mr. Harrison found out about me and my mom. He learned that my mom works really hard, but we don't have much money. He wanted to help us the way I helped him. He gave me a scholarship to a good school and my mom a good job. Maya looked directly at Victoria. Someone told lies about us. They took pictures and wrote mean things that made people think Mr. Harrison was bad. Kids at my school said I was in danger. My mom lost her job. A lady from the government came to ask if I was safe. Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice did not waver. I don't understand why helping people is bad. I don't understand why giving someone a sandwich means you're trying to replace their daughter. I don't understand why being kind gets punished. She turned to William, her small face full of fierce loyalty. Mr. Harrison is good. He's sad because Emily died and he misses her, but he's not trying to make me be Emily. He's just trying to remember what matters. He told me Emily asked him to do something important. I think helping people is important. Maya looked back at the board. If you fire him because he helped us, you're saying kindness is wrong. You're saying that giving a sandwich to someone hungry makes you a bad person. And I really, really hope that's not true. She stepped back from the microphone and walked to where Rachel sat, climbing into her mother's lap and burying her face in her shoulder. The silence was absolute. Robert Chen was the first to speak, his voice rough with emotion. I've been on this board for 12 years. I've seen us make billions of dollars. I've watched us prioritize profit over everything else. And I just watched a 7-year-old child remind me why we should be in business in the first place. He stood and looked at Victoria. Your presentation was compelling, Ms. Harrison. But you forgot something crucial. You forgot that character matters more than stock prices. He turned to William. I move to retain William Harrison as CEO, and I move to remove Victoria Harrison from this board pending SEC investigation into securities fraud. The vote came swiftly, 7 hands raised to retain William. Only Victoria and her closest ally voted against. The motion to remove Victoria passed 8-1. Victoria stood, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. This is a mistake. You're all making an emotional decision based on a child's manipulation. Actually, Ms. Harrison, Thomas said quietly, 2 SEC agents are waiting outside. They have some questions about your trading patterns. As Victoria was escorted from the room, Maya whispered to Rachel, "Did I get her in trouble?" "No, baby," Rachel said, holding her daughter close. "She got herself in trouble. You just told the truth." Victoria Harrison's trial was mercifully brief. With the evidence Thomas had compiled, her attorneys advised an immediate guilty plea to avoid a lengthy public trial that would only deepen her humiliation. 2 weeks after the board meeting, she stood in federal court, her steel gray suit replaced by prison orange, her carefully maintained composure finally shattered. The judge read the charges with clinical precision. Securities fraud, insider trading, conspiracy to obstruct justice through the false CPS complaint. You profited $8 million from your own niece's death, the judge said, her voice heavy with disgust. You then manufactured a scandal targeting a 7-year-old child to earn $14 million more. This court has rarely seen such calculated exploitation of human tragedy. The sentence came swift and severe. 5 years in federal prison. $22 million in restitution to Harrison Enterprises shareholders. Lifetime ban from serving on any corporate board or holding executive positions in publicly traded companies. Victoria showed no emotion as she was led away, but Thomas, watching from the gallery, saw her glance once toward the empty seat where her brother might have sat. William had chosen not to attend. He was at the construction site of the Emily and Maya Center, watching the foundation being poured, choosing to build rather than witness destruction. When Thomas called with the verdict, William's response was quiet. "I hope she finds peace someday, Thomas." Anger destroyed her from the inside out. "I won't let it destroy me." "She'll have 5 years to think about it," Thomas replied. 5 years, William repeated softly. Emily had 6. Victoria wasted 62. I'm not wasting another day. William approached Rachel and Maya cautiously. "Maya, Rachel, I cannot apologize enough for what you've been through. None of this should have happened." Well, Rachel looked up at him, seeing the guilt and grief and hope warring in his expression. "You didn't do this, William. Your sister did, and we chose to fight instead of run." "The job is yours if you want it," William said. "The real one, the director position at the salary originally offered. You've more than earned it." "I'll take the coordinator position," Rachel said firmly, "and I'll earn the promotions." "That's what Maya needs to see." William smiled understanding. "Then let's build this center. Together. The right way." As they prepared to leave the boardroom, Thomas caught Rachel's elbow gently. "Miss Collins, I know the timing is terrible, but when this settles, when things are calmer, would you allow me to take you to dinner? Not as William's attorney, just as someone who has watched you fight for your daughter with more courage than I've seen in 15 years of corporate battles." Rachel looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. The gray at his temples, the kind eyes behind the professional demeanor. The man who had stood beside her through every nightmare of the past months. "Ask me again," she said softly, "when my daughter is no longer being used as a weapon in someone else's war." "I will," Thomas promised. "I absolutely will." 6 months later, the groundbreaking ceremony for the Emily and Maya Center for Pediatric Diagnosis took place on a bright April morning. 200 people gathered on the future site of the facility that would change countless lives. Maya, now 8 years old, stood beside William as they broke ground with a ceremonial shovel. Rachel watched from the front row, her hand clasped in Thomas Bennett's. 2 weeks after the CPS case had closed, true to his word, he had asked her to dinner. Just dinner. No legal documents, no corporate strategy. They had talked for 3 hours at a small Italian restaurant, discovering shared loves of old movies and terrible puns, and the belief that kindness was not weakness. The second dinner came 2 weeks later. Then a third. By the time spring arrived, Thomas had become a constant presence in their lives, not replacing anyone, not filling a void, simply adding something neither Rachel nor Maya had known they were missing. Stability, partnership, someone who showed up not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The first patient had already been identified. Sophie Chen, 5 years old, suspected Batten disease. Early detection meant early treatment, a chance Emily never had. After the ceremony, Maya found Sophie sitting with her parents, small and scared, and trying to be brave. "Hi," Maya said, kneeling down to Sophie's level. "I'm Maya. This building has my name on it, but it's really for you." Sophie's eyes were wide. "Will it hurt?" "The doctors here are really nice," Maya promised. Mr. Harrison made sure of that. And you know what? Being scared is okay. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going even when you are. Sophie reached out and took Maya's hand. That photograph, that moment of two children connecting across fear and hope, would become the iconic image of the center. It would appear in medical journals and fundraising materials and news stories about the revolutionary facility that had saved hundreds of children's lives. But in the moment, it was simply one kind child offering comfort to another. 1 year after the sandwich, Autumn returned to Portland with the same crisp bite that had marked the beginning of everything. But this October was different. This October, the Emily and Maya Center for Pediatric Diagnosis rose from the skyline like a cathedral of hope. The five-story glass and steel structure caught the morning light and threw it back in brilliant fragments. Inside, construction crews worked around the clock to meet the January opening deadline. Outside, 47 families waited with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. William Harrison stood in the skeletal main lobby on a cold Wednesday morning, hard hat slightly crooked on his silver-threaded hair, reviewing progress reports with Dr. Sarah Kim, the center's medical director. The diagnostic equipment arrives next week. Dr. Kim said, her breath misting in the unheated space. The MRI, the genetic sequencing machines, the imaging suite, everything state-of-the-art. And the families, William asked, though he already knew. He received daily updates. 47 children pre-registered, 16 suspected Batten disease cases we've identified through preliminary screening, 31 other rare disease candidates waiting for comprehensive testing. Kim's voice softened. Some of these families have been searching for answers for 5 years, William, watching their children deteriorate without knowing why. William looked at the wall where two photographs already hung despite the construction chaos around them. Emily at 6, smiling from her hospital bed. Maya at 7, holding out a sandwich. The before and after. The question and the answer. Sophie Chen, he asked. Stable. The treatment protocol we funded at Portland General is working. She's our proof of concept. Early detection, early intervention, coordinated care. Dr. Kim pulled up a file on her tablet. Her parents want to bring her to the ribbon cutting. They say she wants to meet Maya, the girl whose name is on the building that saved her life. William felt his throat tighten. Make it happen. Already arranged. Dr. Kim scrolled through her notes. We also have the Martinez family driving up from Sacramento next week. Their 4-year-old son Javier shows symptoms consistent with Hunter disease. 6 specialists in California couldn't give them a diagnosis. They heard about the center. They have hope again. Housing, William asked. 10 family apartments in the East Wing will be ready by December. No charge. Your assistant, Thomas, made sure of that. Dr. Kim looked up from her tablet, her eyes bright. You know what the families are calling this place, the house that a sandwich built? William laughed, surprised. Maya would love that. She should. That child's simple act of kindness is going to save hundreds of lives. Dr. Kim gestured to the unfinished space around them. This building is just brick and steel and glass. But what it represents, what Maya represented, that's what changes the world. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two people who understood that medicine was as much about compassion as it was about science. We open in January, William said. It was not a question. We open in January, Dr. Kim confirmed. No delays. These families have waited long enough. As William left the construction site that afternoon, he paused at the entrance where a temporary sign proclaimed the future, the Emily and Maya Center for Pediatric Diagnosis. Opening January 2021. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to Rachel. Construction on schedule. January opening confirmed. Maya's speech at Westbrook is next week, right? The response came quickly. Friday afternoon. She's nervous, but ready. Thomas and I will both be there. You should come too. William smiled. A year ago, he had been invisible, sitting on a bench, believing he had nothing left to live for. Now he had purpose. Now he had family, not by blood, but by choice. Now he had a promise to keep. He typed back, wouldn't miss it for the world. 1 week later, Maya stood at the podium in Westbrook Academy's auditorium, delivering a speech to the entire student body about kindness and courage. It was the same week the center would officially open its doors in January, though Maya did not mention that in her speech. Brandon Pierce sat in the third row, his earlier cruelty forgotten, or perhaps transformed by time and maturity. Carlos Ramirez sat beside Maya's empty seat, ready to cheer for his best friend. 1 year ago, Maya said, her voice clear and confident, I gave someone a sandwich. I've been asked a lot why I did it. The answer is simple. He looked like he needed it, and I had it to give. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. That one sandwich changed my life, but not because of money or schools or opportunities. It changed my life because it reminded me that the smallest acts of kindness can create the biggest ripples. She smiled, thinking of Sophie Chen, who was responding well to treatment. Thinking of the Martinez family whose son had been diagnosed with Hunter disease early enough to make a difference. Thinking of all the families who would walk through the doors of the center in January looking for hope and finding it. We all have sandwiches to give, Maya concluded. Maybe not food. Maybe it's time or attention or just seeing someone who feels invisible. Whatever it is, give it, because you never know what ripples you might create. The applause was thunderous. That evening, William, Rachel, Maya, and Thomas gathered at the memorial garden where Emily and Caroline Harrison were buried. William placed fresh flowers on both graves, his movements gentle and reverent. Do you think she's proud? Maya asked, looking at Emily's headstone. William knelt beside Maya, his blue eyes clear and at peace for the first time in years. I think Emily would be proud of you. You carried forward the lesson she tried to teach me. That kindness matters more than anything. I wish I could have met her. In a way you did, William said softly. Every child we save at the center, that's Emily's legacy. And yours. They stood together in the gathering twilight, 4 people bound by loss and hope, and the simple truth that one small act of kindness had transformed them all. 5 years later, Maya Collins stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the cap and gown that marked her middle school graduation. At 12 years old, she was valedictorian of her class, headed to a prestigious high school in the fall, already talking about medical school with the certainty of someone who knew her path. Her speech that day would talk about ripples and sandwiches in the moment that defined her. But she would also talk about the 200 children who had been diagnosed at the center. About Sophie Chen, now 10 and healthy, who wanted to be a doctor. About Ethan Brooks, who Maya had met outside the center 2 years ago, and whose life had been saved by early intervention. She would talk about her mother, who was now chief nursing officer at Reynolds Medical Foundation, a position she had earned through years of brilliant work. About Thomas Bennett, who had become her stepfather last summer in a quiet ceremony by the river. And she would talk about William Harrison, who had taught her that grief could transform into purpose, that broken people could heal by helping others, and that sometimes the greatest legacies are built on the smallest gestures. But that was still hours away. For now, Maya picked up her phone and typed a message to the family group chat Thomas had created. Ready for today. Love you all, and thank you for teaching me that kindness creates infinite ripples. William's response came immediately. Proud of you, Maya. Emily would be too. Rachel's followed. You've always been my superhero, baby. Today, the whole world gets to see why. Thomas added a simple heart emoji, which made Maya smile. In his penthouse office, William Harrison stood at the window overlooking the city where everything had changed. On his desk sat 2 framed photographs. Emily at 6, brave and beautiful and gone, and Maya at 7, holding out a sandwich to a stranger. 2 children who had taught him everything that mattered. The center bore both their names, over 800 children diagnosed in 5 years. Lives saved, families given hope. A legacy built not on stock prices or corporate achievements, but on the simple revolutionary act of seeing people and choosing kindness. Do something that matters. Emily had asked. He had kept his promise. And it had started with a sandwich offered freely by a child who had almost nothing but gave it anyway. The ripples were still spreading wider and further than any of them had imagined, touching lives they would never meet, creating change that would outlast them all. Because kindness, real kindness, given without expectation of return, never truly ends. It simply transforms into something greater. One small act, one sandwich, infinite ripples. And in the end, that was everything.